The rain stung Elias's face like 1,000 tiny needles as he stood on the porch. His backpack slung over one shoulder. The weight of his mother's words still burning in his ears. "You're no son of mine." At 14, he'd barely begun to understand himself. But the truth he'd whispered in the dim light of their Virginia living room had torn his world apart. By morning, he was homeless, his heart a tangle of fear and defiance, staring into the wet, unyielding night. Elias had always known he was different. Growing up in the small town of Willow Creek, where church steeples outnumbered traffic lights, he'd felt it in the way his eyes lingered on the boys shooting hoops in the park, not the girls cheering them on. He'd kept it buried, a secret heavier than the hymnals he carried to Sunday service. But that night, when his mother caught him sketching a boy's face in his journal soft jawline, kind-eyed ripped the pages out and demanded answers. "I'm gay," he'd said, voice trembling but steady. The silence that followed was louder than her screams. The door slammed behind him, the lock clicking with finality. Elias stood frozen, the rain soaking his thin jacket, his sneakers squelching in the mud. Willow Creek stretched out before him, its quiet streets a mockery of the chaos in his chest. He had nowhere to go, no money, no plan, just a kid with a truth too big for his hometown to hold. His father had died when he was 6, and his mother's family, devout and unyielding, had already turned their backs. The only person he could think of was Caleb, the town's mechanic, a man who'd always been kind to him when he'd biked past the garage. Caleb was 30, with hands calloused from years of wrenching engines and a smile that made Elias feel safe. He wasn't family, not even a close friend, but he'd once given Elias a soda and let him sit in the garage when his mother was at Bible study. Now, as Elias trudged through the rain, the garage's neon sign flickered like a beacon. He knocked, shivering, his breath visible in the chilly air. Caleb opened the door, his brow furrowing at the sight of the soaked boy. "Elias, what the hell happened?" "Mom kicked me out," Elias mumbled, his voice barely audible over the rain. "I told her I'm gay." Caleb's face softened, but his eyes held a storm of their own. He ushered Elias inside, grabbing a blanket from a chair and wrapping it around the boy's trembling shoulders. The garage smelled of oil and metal, a stark contrast to the sterile judgment of his mother's house. "You're staying here tonight," Caleb said, his voice firm but kind. "We'll figure this out." That night, Elias slept on a cot in the back room, the hum of the heater lulling him into uneasy dreams. Caleb sat up, watching the boy, his mind racing. He'd seen too many kids like Elias in Willow Creek cast out, broken by a town that preached love but practiced exclusion. Caleb had his own secrets, his own reasons for keeping to himself in a place that didn't take kindly to difference. He'd never told anyone he was gay, not after seeing what happened to those who did. But looking at Elias, small and scared but unapologetic, Caleb felt a spark of something he hadn't felt in years: purpose. The next morning, Caleb drove Elias to a youth shelter 2 towns over. "They'll take care of you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You're stronger than you know, kid." Elias nodded, clutching his backpack, his green eyes bright with unshed tears. As the shelter's doors closed behind him, Elias made a silent vow he'd survive this. And one day, he'd come back to Willow Creek not to beg, but to prove he was more than the boy they'd thrown away. The shelter was a lifeline, but it wasn't home. Elias learned to navigate its rules, its crowded rooms, and the stories of other kids like him. Some had been kicked out, others had run away, but all carried the same weight. The world didn't want them as they were. Elias kept to himself, sketching in his journal the faces of boys he'd never meet, the life he dreamed of. He thought of Caleb often, The man who'd given him a night of safety when no one else would. He wondered if Caleb ever thought of him. School was a battleground. The shelter arranged for Elias to attend a new high school. But the whispers followed him. Freak. They called him. Their voices sharp as glass. He kept his head down. His grades steady. Fueled by a quiet rage. He wasn't just surviving, was building something. A future. A way out. At night, he'd lie awake, imagining a life where he could love without fear, where he could walk into Willow Creek and make them see him, really see him. Years passed, and Elias grew taller, his frame lean but strong, his green eyes sharper, tempered by time. He earned a scholarship to a college in New York, leaving Virginia behind but never forgetting. He studied art, pouring his pain into every brushstroke, his sketches evolving into vibrant paintings that told stories of loss and resilience. In the city, he found community friends who loved him, a boyfriend who held his hand in public, unafraid. But Willow Creek lingered in his heart, a wound that hadn't healed. Caleb, too, carried Elias with him. He stayed in Willow Creek, fixing cars, keeping his head down. But he watched the news, read about a young artist making waves in New York, a name that stopped his heart, Elias Harper. The boy he'd helped was no longer a boy. He was a force. His paintings displayed in galleries, his story whispered in art circles. Caleb felt pride, but also guilt. He hadn't done enough. He hadn't fought for Elias the way he should have. In New York, Elias stood in his studio, staring at a blank canvas. He was 24 now, a decade removed from that rainy night. His latest project was his most ambitious, a series of paintings about home, about the places that break you and the ones you build. He knew what he had to do. He had to go back to Willow Creek, not to forgive, but to reclaim, to show them the man he'd become. The idea terrified him, but it also set his heart ablaze. Elias's plane touched down in Richmond, and the familiar humidity of Virginia wrapped around him like a heavy coat. He rented a car, his hands steady on the wheel, but his heart pounding as he drove toward Willow Creek. The town hadn't changed much. Same brick church, same diner with its flickering sign, same whispers behind closed curtains. But Elias wasn't the scared kid anymore. He was an artist, a survivor, a man who'd built a life from the ashes of rejection. The plan was simple but audacious. He'd booked the community center for an art exhibition, his first in Willow Creek. He'd sent invitations to everyone: his mother, old classmates, even the pastor who'd preached fire and brimstone. The paintings were his story, raw and unfiltered, each canvas a piece of his soul. He wanted them to see it, to feel it, to confront the boy they'd cast out. As he unloaded his work, his boyfriend, Marcus, squeezed his hand. "You've got this," Marcus said, his dark eyes warm with belief. Marcus was everything Elias hadn't dared hope for at 14, kind, bold, unapologetically himself. They'd met in college, bonding over late-night talks and shared dreams. Marcus had grown up in Brooklyn, far from the suffocating small-town judgment Elias knew. But he understood pain. His own family had struggled with his identity, though they'd come around. Now, he stood by Elias, his presence a quiet strength as they set up the exhibition. Caleb heard about the event through the town's gossip mill. Some artists coming, they said at the diner. Elias Harper. You know, the kid who got kicked out. Caleb's heart skipped. He hadn't seen Elias in 10 years. But the boy's face was etched in his memory. He debated going, his own fears clawing at him. Willow Creek didn't know Caleb was gay. It kept that locked away. A survival tactic in a town that didn't forgive. But Elias's return stirred something in him, a courage he'd buried long ago. The night of the exhibition, The community center buzzed with curiosity. Locals filed in, some out of intrigue, others to judge. Elias's mother, Ruth, stood near the back, her face a mask of stoicism. She hadn't spoken to her son since that night, hadn't reached out, hadn't apologized. But she was here, drawn by a force she couldn't name. Elias stood at the front, his voice steady as he welcomed the crowd. "This is my story," he said, "and it's yours, too." The paintings were breathtaking. One showed a boy on a porch, rain blurring his face, the colors cold and heavy. Another depicted a shelter, crowded with shadows, yet a single figure glowed with defiance. A third captured two men holding hands under a city skyline, their love a quiet rebellion. Each piece was a wound laid bare, a truth told without apology. The crowd was silent, some moved to tears, others shifting uncomfortably. Caleb slipped in late, standing by the door, his breath catching as he saw Elias. The boy was gone, replaced by a man with a quiet strength that filled the room. Caleb's eyes drifted to the paintings, each one a punch to the gut. He saw himself in them, the man who'd helped but hadn't stayed, who'd chosen safety over solidarity. When Elias's gaze met his, Caleb felt exposed, as if the paintings knew his secrets, too. Ruth approached a painting of a woman turning away from a boy, her face half hidden in shadow. She froze, her hands trembling. It was her, unmistakable, her rejection immortalized in color. She wanted to leave, to run from the truth, but her feet wouldn't move. Elias saw her, his heart twisting. He hadn't painted her to shame her, but to understand her, to understand himself. After the exhibition, people lingered, some approaching Elias with quiet apologies, others with questions. A teenage girl, her eyes wide, told him she was scared to tell her parents she was a lesbian. Elias knelt beside her, his voice soft. "You are enough," he said. "Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." The girl nodded, tears streaming down her face. Caleb watched, his chest tight with pride and regret. As the crowd thinned, Elias found Caleb by the door. "You came," Elias said, his voice a mix of surprise and gratitude. Caleb nodded, struggling for words. "I'm proud of you, kid," he finally said. "I should have done more back then." Elias shook his head. "You gave me a night when I had nothing. That was enough to start." They talked late into the night, the community center emptying around them. Caleb opened up, his voice low, about his own hidden life, his fear of being known. Elias listened, not judging, just understanding. For the first time, Caleb felt seen, not as the mechanic or the quiet neighbor, but as himself. Elias's return wasn't just about confronting the tone, it was about building bridges, even with those who'd stayed silent. The morning after the exhibition, Willow Creek was abuzz. Elias's paintings had stirred something in the town, a crack in its rigid facade. At the diner, people whispered about the boy who'd come back. Not broken, but triumphant. Some called it a spectacle. Others, a reckoning. Elias felt the weight of their eyes as he walked to the garage, Marcus by his side. He needed to see Caleb again, to solidify the connection they'd rekindled. Caleb was under a car when they arrived, his hands smeared with grease. He slid out, wiping his brow, and smiled at Elias. "Didn't expect you back so soon," he said, his voice warm but cautious. Marcus introduced himself, his handshake firm, his presence grounding. They sat in the garage, the same place Elias had found refuge a decade ago, and talked about the exhibition. "You shook this town up," Caleb said, not sure they were ready for it. "They weren't ready for me at 14, either," Elias replied, his tone light but pointed. He shared his plans. He wanted to start a youth program in Willow Creek, a safe space for kids like him, funded by his art sales. Caleb listened, his eyes bright with something like hope. "I want in," he said suddenly. "I've stayed quiet too long. Let me help." Elias was stunned. Caleb had always been a loner, his kindness quiet but limited by fear. Now, he was offering to step into the open, to stand with Elias. It was a risk. Willow Creek wasn't kind to those who challenged its norms. But Caleb's resolve was firm, and Elias felt a surge of gratitude. They spent the day brainstorming, sketching out ideas for the program. Marcus, ever practical, suggested partnering with the shelter that had taken Elias in years ago. That evening, Elias visited his old neighborhood. The house he'd grown up in looked smaller, its paint peeling, its porch sagging. He didn't knock. Instead, he stood across the street, remembering the boy who'd left in the rain. Marcus joined him, slipping an arm around his waist. "You okay?" he asked. Elias nodded. "I'm not here to fix the past. I'm here to build something new." The next day, Elias met with the shelter's director, a woman named Linda who'd been there when he was a teen. She remembered him, her eyes softening. "You were a quiet kid," she said, "but I knew you'd do something big." They discussed the youth program, and Linda offered resources, space, contacts, even staff. Elias felt a spark of possibility. This was more than an art show. It was a chance to change lives. Back in town, Caleb faced his own reckoning. He'd agreed to help, but that meant being honest. At the diner, he overheard a group of men mocking Elias's exhibition, their words sharp with disdain. Caleb's instinct was to stay silent, as always. But then he thought of Elias, of the boy who'd stood up to a town that rejected him. "You're wrong about him," Caleb said, his voice cutting through the chatter. The men stared, surprised. "He's braver than any of us." The words cost Caleb. Whispers followed him, questions about why he cared so much. He didn't tell them he was gay not yet, but he felt the weight of their scrutiny. Still, he kept going, meeting with Elias and Marcus to plan the program. They found a space, an old community hall, and began renovating it. Elias painted a mural on its walls, vibrant colors telling stories of resilience. Caleb worked beside him, hammering nails, his hands steadier than his heart. Ruth, Elias's mother, couldn't shake the image of the painting. She went to church, expecting comfort, but the pastor's sermon about sin felt hollow. She saw Elias's face in her mind, not the man he was now, but the boy she'd pushed away. She hadn't meant to lose him forever. She'd thought he'd come back, repentant, fixed. But he hadn't needed fixing. She had. One evening, Ruth showed up at the community hall. Elias was alone, painting. She stood in the doorway, her voice trembling. "I saw your work," she said. I didn't know." Elias set down his brush, his heart racing. He wanted to be angry, to demand answers, but all he felt was exhaustion. "You didn't want to know," he said quietly. Ruth's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't argue. She left without another word. But the encounter lingered, a crack in the wall between them. The community hall began to take shape, its walls alive with Elias's art, its rooms filled with plans for the youth program. Elias, Marcus, and Caleb worked tirelessly, their vision growing clearer with each day. The program would offer counseling, art therapy, and a safe space for LGBTQ youth, a haven Elias wished he'd had. But Willow Creek wasn't ready to embrace it. Flyers for the program were torn down, and anonymous letters called it a sin. Elias felt the old fear creep in, but he pushed it back. He'd come too far to stop. Caleb faced his own battles. After his outburst at the diner, the town's suspicion grew. He caught sidelong glances, heard murmurs about his interest in Elias's cause. One night, a brick crashed through the garage window. A note tied to it, "Stay in your lane." Caleb's hands shook as he swept up the glass. But he didn't tell Elias. He didn't want to burden the younger man, who was already carrying so much. Instead, he doubled down, spending evenings at the hall, his quiet strength a cornerstone of their work. Marcus noticed the strain on both men. He was an outsider in Willow Creek, his confidence a stark contrast to the town's wariness. He encouraged Elias to keep painting, to use his art as a shield and a sword. One night, as they lay in bed at their rented cabin, Marcus traced the scars on Elias's heart with words. "You're not just saving kids," he said. "You're saving yourself, too." Elias kissed him, grateful for the man who saw him whole. The program's first event was a small art workshop for teens. Elias was nervous, expecting an empty room, but a dozen kids showed up, their faces a mix of curiosity and caution. One boy, Jamie, reminded Elias of himself 14. Quiet, his eyes darting like a cornered animal. Jamie sketched in silence, his drawings dark but powerful. After the workshop, he lingered, whispering to Elias, "I think I'm like you." Elias's heart ached. He gave Jamie his number, promising to be there. Ruth watched from a distance. She hadn't returned to the hall since her awkward encounter with Elias. But she saw the flyers, heard the gossip. Her church friends urged her to denounce the program, but she couldn't. The painting of her turning away haunted her, a mirror she couldn't unsee. She started reading about LGBTQ issues. Secretly, her Bible opened beside articles she found online. The words challenged everything she'd been taught, but they also stirred memories of Elias as a child. His laughter, his light. Caleb, too, was changing. He began attending the workshops, not just as a helper, but as a mentor. One evening, as he helped a teen fix a broken chair, he shared a piece of his truth. "I've spent my life hiding," he said, his voice low. "Don't do what I did. Be you." The teen nodded, and Caleb felt a weight lift. He wasn't out. Not fully, but he was closer than he'd ever been. The town's resistance grew louder. A petition circulated, demanding the program be shut down. At a town hall meeting, Elias stood before a hostile crowd, his voice steady. "This isn't about politics," he said. "It's about kids who need a place to belong." Some listened. Others shouted. Caleb stood beside him, his presence a quiet defiance. Marcus filmed the meeting, determined to document their fight. After the meeting, Elias found a letter slipped under the hall's door. It was from Ruth, handwritten, her words halting but sincere. "I'm trying to understand," she wrote. "I don't know if I can, but I'm trying." Elias read it again and again, torn between hope and hurt. He didn't respond. Not yet. But he kept the letter, its weight a reminder of what he'd lost and what he might still reclaim. As the program gained traction, Elias's art caught the eye of a Richmond gallery. They offered him a solo show, a chance to amplify his message. He accepted, knowing it would draw more attention to the program and more scrutiny to Willow Creek. He painted furiously, his canvases a blend of pain and hope, each one a step toward healing. The Richmond Gallery show was a turning point. Elias's paintings filled the space, their colors vibrant against the white walls, each one telling a piece of his story. The crowd was diverse: art critics, activists, locals from Willow Creek who'd made the drive. Elias stood at the center, Marcus by his side, his heart racing but his voice steady as he spoke about the youth program. "This is for every kid who's been told they're not enough," he said. The room erupted in applause. But Elias's eyes searched for one face, his mother's. Ruth was there, hidden in the back, her hands clasped tightly. She hadn't told anyone she was coming, not even her church friends. The paintings overwhelmed her Elias's pain, his resilience, his love for Marcus, all laid bare. She wanted to speak to him, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, she left a note at the gallery's guest book. I'm proud of you. I'm sorry. She slipped out before Elias could see her. Caleb was there, too. His first time in a gallery. His work boots out of place among the polished crowd. He watched Elias shine, a mix of pride and longing in his chest. After the show, he approached Elias, his voice low. I'm coming out, he said. Not just for you, but for me. Elias hugged him, tears in his eyes. You don't have to do it alone, he said. Caleb nodded, knowing it wouldn't be easy, but feeling ready for the first time. Back in Willow Creek, the youth program grew. Jamie, the quiet teen, became a regular, his sketches evolving from dark to hopeful. He came out to his parents, who struggled but didn't reject him, thanks to Elias's guidance. Other kids found the program, to a girl who'd been bullied, a non-binary teen who'd run away. Elias and Caleb became their anchors, offering the support they'd both once needed. The town's resistance didn't fade, but it weakened. Some locals began to volunteer, moved by the kids' stories. The diner started serving free coffee to program staff, a small but significant gesture. Elias felt the shift, subtle but real. He and Marcus moved into a small house in Willow Creek, a base for their work. Marcus took on the program's logistics, his practicality balancing Elias's passion. Ruth's journey was slower. She stopped attending church, unable to reconcile its teachings with her son's truth. She read his note again, the one she'd sent, and decided to try again. She showed up at the community hall, this time with a gift, a photo album of Elias as a child, filled with moments she'd cherished. I want to know you now, she said, her voice breaking. Elias took the album, his throat tight. It's a start, he said. Caleb's coming out was quieter, but no less seismic. He told his employees first, then his friends at the diner. Some turned away, but others stayed, their support a surprise. He joined the program openly, no longer hiding. One night, he met a man at a Richmond bar, a teacher named Sam. They talked for hours, and Caleb felt a spark he hadn't allowed himself in years. Elias's paintings continued to sell, the proceeds funding the program. He began mentoring young artists, including Jamie, whose talent was undeniable. The community hall became a hub, not just for LGBTQ youth, but for anyone who felt out of place. Elias saw himself in every kid, his pain a bridge to their healing. As winter approached, Elias planned a second exhibition in Willow Creek, this time focused on the program's kids. He wanted their voices heard, their art seen. He invited the whole town, knowing some would come to judge, but hoping others would listen. He was no longer the boy on the porch. He was a man who'd built a home, not just for himself, but for others. The second exhibition was bolder, rawer, held in the community hall now transformed by Elias's mural. The kids' artwork lined the walls, Jamie's vibrant sketches, a girl's abstract paintings, a non-binary teen's collage of found objects. Elias had guided them, but the work was theirs, each piece a shout into the silence of Willow Creek. The crowd was larger this time, a mix of supporters and skeptics, their murmurs filling the air. Elias stood at the front, his voice steady but electric. These kids are your neighbors, he said. Their stories are your stories. He introduced each artist, their faces glowing with pride. Jamie spoke last, his voice shaky but clear. This place saved me, he said. I'm not afraid anymore. The room was quiet, the weight of his words sinking in. Elias caught Caleb's eye, a shared nod of pride. Ruth was there, front row this time, her hands clutching the photo album she'd given Elias. She'd been attending the program's open nights, listening to the kids, learning from them. She still struggled, her faith a tangled knot, but she was trying. After the exhibition, she approached Jamie, offering a quiet compliment on his art. Jamie smiled, wary but grateful, and Elias felt a flicker of hope. Caleb's relationship with Sam grew, a quiet joy he hadn't expected. They spent evenings at the hall, Sam helping with workshops, his warmth and natural fit. Caleb came out to more of the town, each conversation a small victory. Some rejected him, but others, like the diner's owner, surprised him with acceptance. "You're still Caleb," she said, pouring him coffee. "That's enough." The program faced challenges. Funding was tight, and the petition to shut it down resurfaced. Elias and Marcus met with town officials, presenting data on the kids they'd helped fewer runaways, better grades, brighter futures. The officials were skeptical but couldn't deny the results. The program stayed, its roots deepening. Elias's relationship with Ruth evolved slowly. They met for coffee, their conversations awkward but honest. She asked about Marcus, about New York, about the man Elias had become. He told her about his fears, his triumphs, his love. She listened, her apologies quiet but growing. "I was wrong," she said one day, tears in her eyes. Elias didn't forgive her fully, not yet, but he hugged her. The first time in a decade. Marcus proposed to Elias on a quiet night, under the stars outside their Willow Creek house. He didn't have a ring, just words, raw and true. "You're my home," he said. Elias said yes, his heart full. They planned a small wedding, inviting Caleb, Sam, and the program's kids. The town would talk, but Elias didn't care. He was done hiding. The program's impact spread beyond Willow Creek. A nearby town asked Elias to consult on a similar initiative. He traveled with Marcus, sharing their model, his art a universal language. Jamie's sketches were featured in a regional gallery, his confidence soaring. Elias saw the ripple effect, the lives touched by a single act of courage his own. A decade ago, on that rainy porch, Caleb, too, found purpose. He and Sam started a mentorship group for older LGBTQ adults, a space to heal from years of silence. Caleb's garage became a community hub, kids stopping by for advice or just to talk. He felt alive, his fear replaced by connection. He thought of Elias, the boy who'd sparked it all, and smiled. As the second exhibition closed, Elias stood outside the hall, watching the stars. Marcus joined him, their hands entwined. "You did this," Marcus said. Elias shook his head. "We did this." The town wasn't perfect, but it was changing, one heart at a time. Elias felt the weight of his past lift, replaced by the lightness of hope. The wedding was small, held in the community hall, the walls still vibrant with Elias's mural. Jamie and the other kids decorated, stringing lights and painting signs. Caleb and Sam helped, their laughter filling the space. Ruth was there, hesitant but present, her gift a quilt she'd sewn, patterns of Elias's childhood woven with new threads. Elias and Marcus exchanged vows, their words simple but fierce, promising to build a life together, no matter the odds. The town's reaction was mixed. Some sent congratulations. Others stayed silent. A few protested outside, their signs predictable but powerless against the joy inside. Elias danced with Marcus, then with Jamie, who grinned like the kid he was starting to be again. Caleb toasted them, his voice thick. To love, he said, and to never hiding again. The room cheered. A defiant chorus. The youth program grew stronger. Its funding bolstered by Elias's art sales and new grants. They expanded, hiring a counselor and offering scholarships for kids like Jamie. Elias mentored them, his studio a safe space for creation. He painted less about pain now, more about hope, his canvases bright with possibility. Marcus handled the program's growth, his practicality a perfect complement to Elias's vision. Ruth became a quiet ally. She didn't march or protest, but she spoke up at church, challenging the pastor's rhetoric. Some friends turned away, but others listened, their minds opening. She and Elias met weekly, rebuilding their bond. She told him stories of his father, who'd loved him fiercely, and Elias shared his dreams, his fears. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. Caleb and Sam moved in together, their relationship a steady light. Caleb's garage remained a hub, kids stopping by for advice or just to feel safe. He came out fully, no longer caring who judged. The brick through his window felt like a lifetime ago. He and Elias worked side by side, their friendship a cornerstone of the program. Caleb saw himself in Elias's courage, a mirror of what he could have been and still could be. The town changed. Slowly, the diner's owner started a pride event, small but bold, with Elias's art as the centerpiece. Jamie's parents attended, their acceptance a quiet victory. Other families followed, drawn by their kids' transformations. Willow Creek wasn't a haven, but it was no longer a prison. Elias felt the shift, each step forward a testament to his return. Elias and Marcus traveled for the program, consulting on new initiatives across Virginia. Their story spread, articles and podcasts sharing their work. Elias's paintings were exhibited nationally, each show a platform for advocacy. He spoke about the boy he'd been, the man he'd become, and the kids who needed a chance. His voice, once silenced, now carried weight. One night, Elias found an old sketch in his journal. The boy he'd drawn at 14, the one that had cost him his home. He painted it again, this time with Marcus's face, their hands entwined. The canvas was a promise, a reclamation. He hung it in their home, a reminder of where he'd started and how far he'd come. Caleb, too, found peace. He and Sam planned a trip, their first as a couple, to a city where they could be open. He thought of Elias, the boy who'd knocked on his door, and realized he'd been saved as much as he'd saved. The program was their legacy, a beacon for those still in the dark. As spring bloomed, Elias stood on the porch of his old house, now empty, its sail a final goodbye. He didn't feel loss, only closure. Marcus joined him, their future bright. Ready? Marcus asked. Elias nodded. Always. Years later, Elias stood before a crowd in Willow Creek, the community hall now a thriving center. The youth program had grown, its impact undeniable, with chapters in 3 states. Jamie, now in college, spoke beside him, his art a testament to the program's power. The crowd included locals, activists, even politicians, all drawn by the story of a boy who'd returned and changed a town. Elias's mother, Ruth, sat in the front, her face soft with pride. Their relationship wasn't perfect, but it was real. She volunteered at the program, her faith evolving to embrace love over judgment. She'd lost friends, but gained a son, and that was enough. Elias hugged her after his speech, their bond a quiet triumph. Caleb and Sam were there, their hands clasped, their lives intertwined with the program. Caleb had sold the garage, using the money to fund scholarships. He and Sam mentored dozens, their home a refuge for kids who needed one. Caleb's coming out had cost him, but it had given him Moria life without shadows. The exhibition that night was a celebration, not just of Elias's art, but of the kids. The town. The change. Paintings lined the walls, each one a story of survival. Jamie's work hung beside Elias's. A passing of the torch. The crowd moved through the hall. Their whispers now of awe, not judgment. Willow Creek had learned to listen. Elias and Marcus had married, their life a blend of advocacy and art. They adopted a child, a girl named Lily, whose laughter filled their home. Elias painted her joy a new chapter in his story. Marcus ran the program's national outreach, his pragmatism grounding Elias's dreams. Together, they were unstoppable. The night ended with a toast. Elias's voice clear. "This is for the kids we were," he said, "and the ones we're saving." The room erupted. Glasses raised. Caleb caught Elias's eye. A silent thank you for the boy who'd knocked on his door, sparking a revolution. Ruth wept, her heart full. Jamie grinned, his future bright. As the crowd dispersed, Elias stood outside, Marcus and Lily beside him. The stars above Willow Creek were the same ones he'd seen at 14. But they felt different now, hopeful. Not heavy. He thought of the boy on the porch. The rain. The fear. That boy was still in him. But he was no longer alone. The program's legacy grew, its model adopted nationwide. Elias's art inspired laws, conversations, change. He never forgot Willow Creek, returning each year to speak, to paint, to listen. The town wasn't perfect, but it was a place he'd reclaimed, not with anger, but with love. Caleb, Ruth, Jamie, and countless others carried the torch, their lives woven into Elias's story. The community hall stood as a beacon, its mural a promise. No one would be kicked out again. Elias looked at Marcus, at Lily, at the town he'd changed, and knew he'd kept his vow. He'd returned, not to beg, but to build. And he'd left them speechless.